Hey friends, welcome to Homegrown Florida. I'm Katrina, and today we are going to be getting into what you can start from seed in your garden right now. So April is our last good month of good weather, and by good weather I mean not so hot that the plants can't handle it. Now I live in Central Florida in zone 9B, but if you're south of me, this still pertains to you all the way into the 11s, and those north of me, I think we can talk all the way up to zone 8. So what do you expect in April? April means that we are going to have highs reaching into the 80s, if not a little bit more, especially for those guys down in the tippy bottom South Florida area. For those up in the zone 8s, that top of the Georgia line in Florida, or other, zone 8Bs, you guys are going to be looking at really nice weather. Actually, you're going to be getting into the mid to high 70s. Very lovely weather here in Central Florida. We're hitting 80s, just tapping into those 80s every once in a while. We're also experiencing absolutely hardly any rain. Now, we did have a little bit of rain last month, but it's not our typical daily rain that we see. So those won't be starting until we get into like June or July-ish. So these are perfect temperatures for a lot of our warm weather plants that we should already have in the ground. But it's not great for our cool weather crops. Those are out of the picture now, guys. If you're even in North Florida, South Florida, everywhere in between, you can't be starting those. That's going to be like your lettuces, your carrots, your broccoli, your Brussels sprouts, a lot of the leafy greens. You can't really be growing those. But what can you grow? Let me show you around. Now let's start out with leafy greens. There are some leafy greens that can handle hot temperatures. I call them tropical greens. This is one of them right here. Most of the tropical greens, not all, but most are perennials, which is cool, right? You can grow them all year round. This is called, I'm gonna say it wrong, Sissoo, S-I-S-S-O-O, spinach. It is a perennial, and to me, it is the one that tastes most like regular spinach. It doesn't have any of that, mucilaceous, what do you call it? Mucusy type thickness, gelatinous substance. It doesn't have any of that. It doesn't have that bitter taste that some of them do. It actually even kind of looks like spinach with the way that it kind of wrinkles. It's really my absolute favorite, and I almost don't grow anything else other than this. I did do a video I think maybe a year ago, where I taste tested a bunch of different tropical spinaches, and honestly this is the one that won for me in the long term. But there are lots of others. So I really liked the red Malabar spinach. That's a good one. Longevity, Okinawa, and a lot of other different hibiscus style ones. There was one that I had years ago called Kiko's Crump. That was a really good one. Big leaf, big leaf. A little mucilaceous, I can't say that word, just like a little bit like thicker. And I would use those for lettuce wraps. That was really good. But in a salad, it really wasn't great as a whole leafy green in a salad. And honestly, none of them are really great as a whole salad, except for this one. Like if you like spinach salad, this reminds me of just spinach so much that you could eat it as a spinach salad. But if you grow several of them, add in some cranberry hibiscus that loves to grow during the summer, and you can have a really neat, very lovely salad, a whole bowl. And a lot of these you can eat raw. There are some like chaya that you don't necessarily want to eat raw, that you want to eat cooked because of the way that they grow. That's more of a tree. But there are a lot of tropical options out there, and I strongly encourage you to get out there and try them. Ethiopian kale, that one was a good. Egyptian spinach, there's a lot of them out there. One of my favorite places to get these is going to be Elise down in St. Pete. She has the Urban Harvest. And I found some good ones over at Jira's garden as well. She has some Swiss chards that are very lovely. So definitely give those a try. The next ones on the list are going to be fruiting crops. So mainly the ones that are going to work across the entire zones is going to be tropical squashes. So there's a few different kinds that I particularly like. Very common Seminole pumpkins, Tahitian melon squash, trombocino. Those are all some of my favorites. The tromboncinos you can use as a summer squash, or you can let it completely mature to a winter squash. You are going to need to work on managing the pests if they're a big problem in your area. Now, squash vine borers and squash bugs typically don't bother these types because they're part of a machata variety. There's different kinds of squashes. There's like Petbo, Maximo, machata. And if it falls into the machata, it has a different like stem. The stem isn't, it's kind of thicker. It is still somewhat hollowed out like some of the other squashes, but not so much that it's so easy for the borers to get in there. And the other thing is it re-roots along the ground. So if you let it crawl on the ground, it will re-root. So even if one part of the squash gets killed by those pests, the other ones live on. They're great varieties for down here to grow through the summer. Now, if you want to start those, you can grow them through the summer, right? Absolutely. And a lot of them will fruit, especially if you give them some shade. But I don't necessarily start them in like June or July. I'm going to start them like in April or May, because they will struggle trying to get started in the middle of our hot summer. It's not that they won't work. It's just, it's going to take them so long. To get established, to grow, they're going to be struggling the whole time as they're babies. If you can get them past that baby stage and into like their adolescent stage, they're going to do much better in the summer. And I think that has to do with how much foliage it creates. So it creates so much foliage that it actually like makes its own shade, and it covers the ground around it so that it keeps the temperatures low. So definitely start them sooner than later, and they will grow through the entire summer, which is beautiful. It'll fill out your garden bed. It'll look great. A couple other varieties that I don't talk about very often, but one I am so excited about is going to be chayote. I don't usually grow chayote down here because technically where I'm at, I don't think it's going to survive my winters, but I think I can protect it. So I did purchase some chayotes and I have sprouted them, and I am so excited to grow them. They are my favorite squash in the world. Favorite squash. They're so good. And then there's loofahs, which I grew last year to make sponges, and those things get out of control. And honestly, I started those in the middle of dead summer and they didn't even care. Now, what about the other fruiting crops? Things like tomatoes, tomatillos, peppers, eggplants, melons, the typical squashes, cucumbers, right? Those are not in play, guys. You can't be starting those from seed now. If you do, the plant will grow. But more likely than not, you're going to hit disease when our rain starts, or you're going to hit pest problems, or they're just going to fail to thrive, and then they'll get a little bit into the adolescent stage and then they die off. Or they grow to a beautiful plant and never produce any flowers, and that is heartbreaking. So let me save you the trouble there. Don't start those now. Now, if you are in the tippy top part of Florida, in the zone 8, you know, South Georgia, South Alabama, those kinds of areas, you still have some time for transplanting these. You actually still have time for your melons, because melons can handle the heat a little bit better than some of those other fruiting crops, but you really, it's kind of like those tropical squashes. You need to get those started ASAP. And if you can find them as small plants, that's even better. They do take a little bit to get to that adolescent stage where they can handle the heat, and that's where you need them at. Once again, once they get big enough that they're creating enough foliage to like shade the ground and create like a coolness on the ground to block from that heat, they're in a much better state. Next up, let's talk about hot weather plants. Yes, we are talking about hot weather. I know it's still kind of lovely, right? Why are we already jumping into the hot weather plants? Well, because you need to start thinking about not when you're planting the plant, but when it gets to its full mature age, what is the temperatures going to be like? And in 2 months, when these beans are completely ready to be harvested, it's going to be so hot that they are not going to want to germinate. They're going to wilt underneath the sun. They're going to start getting a lot of disease. I mean, they already are getting some disease from the little bit of rain that we've had. So they're going to get like really diseased by the time we start getting our daily rain. So we got to start thinking about hot weather crops. So what are hot weather crops? Well, the easiest one to think about is sweet potatoes, and you definitely need to be getting on those now, because it does take about 4 to 6 weeks to create your own slips. Some other ones that I really love, I grew them last year, is ginger and turmeric. You can actually buy ginger and turmeric from the grocery store and look for the ones with the little nodes on them, and then plant those on their side, kind of above the, not super deep. I did them super deep one year. Nope. Just barely covered with soil, just barely, almost like sticking out the top. That's the way that I do them. And they start sprouting around April. It's going to be funny because I planted mine like, I don't know, 3 months ago. I took them from once I harvested them and I put them right back in the pot and nothing has happened. And last year I did that and I was like, what is wrong? It's because they actually go based on it like a time of year versus sprouting after a certain number of days. Like with most seeds, like you plant beans, you probably expect them to come up in 3 to 5 days. Ginger and turmeric don't work that way. They are waiting for a certain time. And I find that time to be April-ish. That tends to work for me. It's looking for a certain heat, I think. Another one which I've started in trays already is gonna be Roselle. Roselle, if you have not tried Roselle, guys, you are missing out. It is in the hibiscus family. If you've ever had red zinger tea, that is what Roselle is. It is what makes it red. It gives it that tart flavor. That is what makes red zinger tea. Now the reason why I start them now as opposed to later, because you can definitely start them in all the way to summer, is they are triggered by the amount of daylight. So the way that they work is you grow them and you get the plant as big as possible so that it has as many points as possible for fruiting or for flowering. And then once we start getting into like September, October, November, the decrease in daylight that happens throughout the year actually triggers these guys to flower. And if your plant isn't big enough, when it comes time for that, then it's just not gonna flower very much. A couple other hot weather plants that you can start are gonna be things like peanuts or cowpeas, okra, jicama, lima beans. There's really still a lot that you can grow. You just have to be really selective. And when you see things like heat tolerant on the packages, it doesn't necessarily mean our heat down here. If you get above 95 degrees on a regular during your summer, those heat tolerant varieties, they're just not gonna hold. So if you see heat tolerant tomato, heat tolerant carrot, heat tolerant lettuce, they're not that heat tolerant. What they're talking about is the heat swings that we have during our winters or during our spring and our fall, not during our summer. So really stick to those plants that really love the heat, like the ones I already mentioned. But don't forget, there's also fruits. Now this is the most amazing part of the season, right? We are in fruit season. It's not really a season and probably nobody else is gonna call it that but me. I don't know, maybe they do, I don't know. But we're in fruit season, and here in the South, like fruit season is amazing. Not only are we getting a lot of the fruit that like some of our northern climate gardeners get, we get them early, like our peaches. I have a friend that's a little bit south of me over on the East Coast that's growing apples. She had her first bite of her first apple and I'm so jealous. So we have plums and nectarines and even grapes and things like that that we can grow down here that, you know, are similar to our northern friends. But we have the added bonus of the tropical fruits, and those can be started or planted now as well. One of them is going to be these pineapples. I know they look terrible. They went through winter. They don't like my winters here. At first they looked normal after we went through a couple frosts, like it didn't bother them. Then as the weeks progressed, they started to look kind of crappy. Then we cut our tree and the palm fronds fell on them and kind of really made them crappy, but they're going to be just fine. They're happy, they're healthy, they're just, their leaves look a little tattered. But pineapples are a great option. They do take about 2 years to grow pineapples, sometimes a little bit more depending on if you're starting them from the tops of pineapples or from pups. You also can do papayas, which, guys, if you've ever eaten a store papaya and you're like, I didn't really like it, didn't have a lot of flavor. Yeah, same. Until I grew my own. Papayas are so good. They're like tropical and sweet and they're just really, really yummy. Very amazing fruit, especially if you grow it at home. Bananas, that's another amazing one. You can also get fruit trees that are tropical. Think like avocados, mangoes, jabuticabas, jujubes, loquats, lychee, mulberry. Mulberries technically can grow pretty much across the entire United States. I've learned that. All the citruses, the lemons, the limes, the oranges, the pomelos, the calamandas. I mean, there's so many tropical fruits that you can grow that if you're struggling with having some motivation during the summer months because it's just so hot here, start getting into fruit trees because fruit trees and fruit bushes, not only do they provide something for us gardeners to do, but they do it in shade because the canopy of the tree is so nice. Doesn't really apply to the pineapples here, but definitely applies to all the other ones that you can grow, and you can bask in their shade while you enjoy their fruit. So don't miss out on fruit season. Before we jump to our next one, which is going to be flowers and all the beautiful ones that you can grow during the hottest part of our year, I want to give you guys a little info on my ebook. I created this. This is a proof. I'm working on getting a physical copy available, but right now I do have an electronic copy available on my website. If you go to homegrownfloridagarden.com, click on store, and then go to my Shopify store where you can buy this, and it will send you a downloadable link. I spent 2 years pouring my heart and soul into this book with tried and true varieties, information, timing. If you want to know all the different things you can grow at all the different times, this is the book to get. So make sure to check that out. Now moving on, we have flowers. Guys, when it gets so hot in the garden that you don't really want to be out there, you want to sit on your patio or look out from your window and look at your garden and all you see are weeds and stuff you don't want to deal with because it's way too hot. Wouldn't you rather see flowers? Now I know I don't have a lot yet. These were some volunteers, but I do have more growing, and there's quite a few flowers that you can grow, and flowers come in so many colors and sizes and shapes. They're gorgeous. So what are some of the flowers that can handle our heat? My personal favorites, number one, are going to be these guys. These are nasturtiums. You can grow them in like this little bush style, but they also have the vining style that get very, very large. Zinnias, guys, get into zinnias. They love the heat, absolutely love it, and they come in so many beautiful colors, beautiful shapes. They're not just like the puffy ones, but they also come in like the single petal types. Then you have sunflowers, which by the way are just like the happiest little plant in the garden, and you can grow tons of different colors. I absolutely love the teddy bear sunflowers. I actually haven't grown them, but I've seen them and they're gorgeous, so I'm going to be growing them this year. But there's so many other sunflowers that you can grow as well. Don't forget marigolds. So marigolds are great for repelling the root knot nematodes. So you can like blanket your entire garden bed in marigolds and have a beautiful summer season where you're just looking at these gorgeous marigolds. Are just so pretty. You can let them reseed right there, drop their seeds, and then they'll pop up at the right time of year, which is just about now. They'll pop up again, and you can look at beauty while they work on your garden. I'm also trying a few other ones. I'm doing a bunch of lilies that are meant for hot climates, like blackberry lilies. I'm doing an oriental lily. I'm doing like a flamethrower lily, I think is what it's called. I'm also working on trying dahlias for the first time. I've grown petunias for a number of years. I'm gonna do those. They don't hold out all the way through the summer, but they look really pretty. Chamomile with the little white flowers, those are really cool to start. You can do calendula and use it as like a natural medicinal flower that you can use in all your skincare products. Really, really beautiful flowers, as well as like they are very useful. I'm trying a bunch of other new ones this year because I really want to expand my summer garden to almost be like a flower garden during the summer when it's really hard to grow food. I'm still going to be growing food. Absolutely. It's like my passion to grow our food. So I'm definitely going to be growing food, but there's always a lot of open spaces in my garden during the summer, and I want to fill them up, and I want to fill them up with pretty things. Nothing better than walking out in this heat and just feeling, oh, just too much. But then you look across and you see these happy sunflowers and these little pink powder puff zinnias and these bright orange gorgeous nasturtiums, and you're like, it's not so bad. It's not so hot. But if you've been following along with this series, let me show you around the garden so that way you can see in April, what does the garden look like? Like, what are some of the things that you should be harvesting this time of year if you started them at the appropriate times? So I mentioned fruits. I definitely have mulberries, loquats. Check these guys out. They are almost ready to pick. They're getting to that yellow-orange color, which is so cute. And then down here, you can see even more of them. I also have my plum tree that has the babiest, smallest plums on it so far. And then over here, we have our peach tree. And let me see if I can find them. They're so little right now, they're hard to find, but here are some peaches right there. So there's a ton of fruit going on. That isn't even all of it. I've got lemons. I've got some avocados flowering. Behind me here, I have a bunch of herbs, flowers. I even have some beans. Oh, check this out. Believe it or not, I have lettuce still going. Now this is in deep, deep shade right here next to my shed. So it is benefiting from that deep shade and allowing me to continue some lettuce for a little bit longer, although I expect that to change any day now. I also have all of my, we call them native plants, coming back in. They looked really bad during the winter, but on either end I have a broccoli and then another broccoli right there. And those, believe it or not, are still giving me side shoots. Just a little bit, probably only enough for 2 meals a week. So they're probably gonna get pulled real soon. I have a ton of tomatoes. They have an enormous amount of flowers on all of them, and we're really pushing to get as many flowers as possible right now so that when the heat starts, you know, they will stop flowering and we can still have tomatoes. But can you see that little tomato right there? Got my first one. Right next to the tomatoes, I have a bunch of beans. These are dry beans, and then right next to it is some borage. Another bed of tomatoes because I couldn't help myself, and look at that, more baby tomatoes. We're gonna have so many tomatoes this year. I'm so excited, and I'm trying so many different varieties. I'm also trying a new variety of squash. This is a dunja squash. It's basically meant for very hot climates. I believe it's in the machata variety family. I'll have to check that again, but it grew very well for me last year, but I started it a little bit too late. I still have my Brussels sprouts here. Now I have mulched them pretty heavily because I'm hoping I can keep them cool enough, because the sprouts really aren't that big. If you can see them, I wish they were bigger, but that's okay. Hopefully they give me a couple more weeks without bolting. Let me show you the other side, because there is some indication that they're not doing well. We look from this side. Can you see? I know it's kind of dark in here, but can you see that? What's happening right there? Those are doing something called blowing out. And basically that means it's getting so hot that they don't want to hold into the tight shape anymore. They want to open up and become like an open head cabbage or an open head leaf lettuce. And they're still good, but they're not what we're looking for. I also have a bunch of melons, and then that's watermelon, a seedless watermelon, a seeded watermelon, and then some cantaloupe, which usually does pretty good through the summer. Some more tomatoes that I just planted the other day. This is my garlic and some cucumbers. Check out the baby cucumbers. Can you see those little flowers with the baby? This is a parthenocargenic, I can't say that right, but it is a kind that doesn't require pollination. So they're all female flowers that pop up. And so each one of them should pollinate themselves, and I should have cucumbers real soon. If y'all have been watching for a little while, you know I've had trouble with tomatillos, but I finally have 2 plants that look super healthy and happy and are growing, and I see a lot of flowers. So these will last a lot longer through summer than the tomatoes will, because of the husk kind of protects the tomatoes or the tomatillos. So I should be getting a good crop of these too. Over my shoulder here, we have potatoes. In that far corner over there, we see some of that mulch. That is peppers with some green onions. And then my favorite one, I'm very hopeful that I'm gonna get this one going and to harvest. Believe it or not, but I'm actually doing a 3 sisters garden right here. These are my climbing, they're called Blue Lake pole beans. So they're climbing the trellis. They could climb the corn, but I put them in a little too soon. But I also have the corn. This is probably the healthiest corn I've ever seen in my garden. Typically, when I grow corn, I have so many problems, but I am doing something different this year. And if it works out, I'm definitely gonna share it with you. I also put in here a couple seeds. They haven't popped up yet, of some machata variety butternut squash, to see if I can do the full 3 sisters, let that squash grow in between this corn to kind of keep this soil nice and cool. So that's everything I have growing in the garden. I hope this gave you some ideas of what you can start in your garden this time of year. Get out there, get it done before it gets too hot, guys, because it's gonna be full-blown summer before you know it. If you like this series, head down to the comments, let me know, give me a thumbs up, and subscribe so you don't miss any future ones. Happy gardening, guys.